So recently I learned that the commandment in King James English, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain," doesn't mean what I thought it meant. Of course, probably like you, I thought it meant that we shouldn't curse using God's name. Seems straightforward enough, right? But that only scratches the surface. The commandment was meant to go way deeper than that, because originally it meant that you were not to use the name of God, period. You weren't to speak it at all. Because speaking the sacred name of God, which in Hebrew is Yahweh, was vanity. It implied that you knew who or what God was. And how could anyone, except for the Jewish high priest who only spoke the name of Yahweh at special times, how could anyone know God enough to speak God's name? Still today, many Jewish people won't and don't speak the sacred name of Yahweh. And when they write about God, they spell the word with a dash, G-D. Not using the name of the Lord our God in vain, not speaking that name at all, demands a deep level of humility on the part of the believer, which, when you think about it, is not such a bad place to start. Humility when it comes to speaking about God or speaking for God seems to be in pretty short supply these days. But as you heard in today's reading in Exodus, the chapter which holds the foundational story of God's call to Moses and God's plan to liberate the Hebrew people, speaking the name of God became Moses' responsibility. Moses was to report to the Israelites that I am has sent you to me. The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent you to me. And so in this remarkable encounter with Moses, God is revealed as relational and compassionate toward the Israelites. And God, Yahweh, becomes known. I am who I am, the text tells us. But there's an important distinction here for us to understand, because the English translation of this text, the translation, I am who I am, is incorrect. Those words in Hebrew are translated, I will be, who or how or where I will be. Or a better English translation is, I am who I am becoming. Meaning, don't think that you can predict me. I am a God who is going to surprise you. Not static, not a definable noun. No, Yahweh moves and is infinite possibility and opportunity. God is an active verb. This is important for many, many reasons, but for us to tap into God, the I am who I am becoming, is the foundation, really, of our faith. It's why God created us. It's why God breathed into us and gave us life. Because just like Moses, we are chosen to be God's children, and we're called to be part of God's becoming, to be present at the burning bush, to be a part of the mystery of God. To be sure, though, becoming part of God's mystery can be scary. I mean, look at Moses. God's call terrified him, and he protests a lot and often. He was sure that leading God's people to freedom was too much for him, that this was an impossible ask. But Yahweh persisted and reassured Moses with the promise, I will be with you. The name of God will always be with you. It's not hard to empathize with Moses' insecurity and fear in this story. My experience is that just about everyone who is confronted with the possibility of answering God's call is on some level terrified. Because change very often, most often, seems impossible. And the path, the destination, the journey never seems very clear. But Yahweh still persists and opens a way. You kind of get this sense that even Jesus in today's gospel is beginning to fear God's call. When he tells Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," Jesus needs just a moment to remember God's name, to remember God's presence with him so that he can continue this journey on to Jerusalem. Now, the good news here is that even in our fear or uncertainty, God's name, and this is very important, is as close to us as our next breath. And what I mean by that is that in Hebrew, only consonants spell the sacred name of God. YHWH, Yahweh. And to speak those consonants correctly, you don't need to close your lips or bend your tongue like you're speaking other words in a way that would be like speaking God's name in vain. Okay? Because the sacred name is not actually spoken. It can't be used in vain because the sacred name is only breathed. Yahweh. Yahweh. You can try it for yourself. This is how we say God's name. And it's how we know that God is present with us at all times. It's how Moses led the Israelites out of captivity. God is as close to us as our next breath, and so God's presence not only fills up our lungs, but moves in us all the way down to a cellular level. And it's not vanity. It's the first word we speak when we're born. It's the last word we speak at our death. And in between those times, God cannot be categorized or placed in a box. God cannot be contained by some doctrine or boiled down to a simple set of rules. Rather, God is a verb, a breath, in love with all of God's people and calling us to experiment, to love, to forgive, to pray, to give, to become. So don't speak the name, breathe it. Amen.